Hi, I'm here today talking to Terry Etherton of the Etherton Gallery. As you'll hopefully see, he's a very interesting fellow and very gracious with his time. So Terry, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your talking with me in my intro to art class. First of all, how did you get How did you get involved in the arts? I read that you have 2 Bachelor of Arts degrees, and so presumably you had some interest in the arts before you went to college. But.
Well, not before. It happened sort of when I grew up in the Midwest in Illinois, and I got drafted out of high school in 1969, went to the Army, came back, and went to Southern Illinois University, where I got a degree in cinema and photography. It was a double major. And so that started, my interest in photography and film. And after graduating from SIU, I moved to San Francisco for 10 years and continued studies at San Francisco State University.
Very good. Do you do any of your own art? Do you photography, make films?
Not anymore. I did. I was very active as a photographer for about a decade, exhibiting, and I've got work in some collections around the country. And I worked as a cinematographer in San Francisco for almost 8 years, doing documentary, training, industrial films. I became a pretty reliable cameraman.
Oh, very nice. That must have been kind of fun and exciting and a little bit terrifying, I would imagine.
It was. It was a little bit schizophrenic because when you work in the film world, you may work for 6 months straight, 7 days a week, and then nothing happens for 3 or 4 months because the producers are trying to put together funding, and so it's really hard to have a normal life. Mm-hmm. Which is part of the reason that eventually I stopped doing that and moved to Tucson and opened a gallery in 1981.
Makes sense. Did you know Tucson before you came here?
I did. Between projects, when I was living in San Francisco, I used to come down to visit friends of mine that I went to high school with in the Midwest. They had moved here in the early 70s, and while they were at work, I would go over to the Center for Creative Photography, and I just started to really like the town, and I started to understand the cost of living here, here in Tucson as opposed to San Francisco, and I realized that I was never going to be able to buy a house in San Francisco or have a space like this. It was just way too expensive, and so on one trip down here one day I found a space and just sort of, impulsively kind of decided to open a gallery without really knowing what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. That's a big leap of faith.
Well, it was. I was a little bit familiar with the gallery world from living in San Francisco. I knew a number of the photography dealers there, Jeffrey Frankel, Simon Lewinsky, and Ursula Groper, and some other people who had galleries there. So I was in and out of galleries a lot, and I kind of, had a general idea of how they operate, at least how they physically operate. What I really didn't know was about, financing and money and, building a market and all of that sort of thing. I had to sort of learn that the hard way.
I see on your website that the gallery is a part of the Association of International Photography and Art Dealers. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, that's an organization that we have probably 135 to 140 members worldwide. They're primarily Americans, but there's virtually APAD members in almost every country, in Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia, China now. It's an organization that's about 35 years old, and it exists so that the public has some sort of comfort level about a member of this organization. To be a member, you have to have been in business for a certain number of years. You have to have other members sponsor you. You have to adhere to a very strict set of bylaws. And every year we do a very large art fair in New York at the Armory. So part of the reason you want to be an APAD is to be able to participate in that show. And that, I joined in 1985, and I've participated in the APAD photography show in New York every year since. And for us, it's probably the most important thing we do all year. Not only for the sales that we make, but the collectors we meet, the curators that we meet, also interacting with a lot of my colleagues and sort of seeing what they're up to. It's a really important thing for us.
Makes sense. Networking is always important, no matter what you're doing. So
yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. I also saw that you are a member of the American Society of Appraisers and that you had done some of the Antique Roadshow.
Yeah, I became certified in, I think it's in 1990, with a specialty in 19th and 20th century fine art photography. So you go through a set of tests, and then you I do appraisals for a lot of different reasons, primarily though for charitable contributions. Somebody wants to donate something to a museum, they need an independent appraisal to do it. I do it for insurance purposes where somebody's collection needs to be updated and insured, or sometimes I'll do it to settle estates, and often divorces, sadly. But that's a little side business that's really kind of a good thing for me. I actually enjoy doing it. You know, I've been on the road show a couple times, which is a very interesting experience.
So imagine.
Yeah.
In terms of gallery work and appraising work, is it predominantly gallery work, or do you have a pretty good balance?
No, I mean, the appraisal work is a very small part of what I do in terms of the amount of time I devote to it. You know, it's a nice little side income for me. You know, and I get it's most of the time it's interesting because it's, you know, generally interesting enough material, and you have to become very intimate with it because you have to look at everything and evaluate everything. It involves doing research, you know, about prices, maybe talking to other dealers, going through auction databases. So, you know, it's at the end of it all, you've learned a lot. So, you know, that part of my business sort of keeps me informed about, you know, what the value of things are. I go to auctions in New York frequently at Sotheby's Christie's, Phillips Swan. They have auctions, photo auctions, twice a year, and I tend to attend those when I can.
Makes sense. So you said you founded the gallery here in 1981. Have you always been in this location here?
No, the location we're in right now, I moved into in 1988. I had a space for 7 years prior to that, about a mile from here, over on 6th Street near 4th Avenue. It was a small little storefront, maybe 1,400 square feet. And that's where I started out. I found that space when I was on a visit down here in the summer of 1980. And the rent was $235, which included utilities. And so I thought, well, you know, how hard can this be? You know, you get the space, you track light it, and I kind of knew a little bit about graphic design. I knew how to do announcements, and I knew a little bit about writing press releases. So the first 5 or 6 years, I did absolutely everything myself. I didn't have an employee until probably the 7th year in. Actually, probably until we moved into this space. And now I've got 3 full-time employees and a half-time employee.
Yeah, that's a big jump. And I saw you added the Temple Gallery in 1990. How did that come about?
Well, the Temple of Music and Art was built in 1923, and it was a theater originally, and there was an art gallery in it originally, and it almost got torn down in the late 80s, but there was a big outcry from local artists who said, you know, you can't do this. This is a local treasure. And long story short, the city decided to rehab it, which they completely restored it back to its original condition, including right down to the color of the paint. The gallery upstairs needed to be used as a gallery again because that was what it was originally purposed for. And they put out, the Temple of Music and Art, Arizona Theater Company, put out a search for somebody to manage it. And we proposed that we manage it, and we would do 6 shows a year. Every time there are production changes, we have a new show there, and limited to mostly local artists. So since 1990, we've done every show there, 6 to 7 shows a year.
Yeah, that's fun. Having it line up with the different shows seems like such a great idea.
It is. It's also really, really difficult because, you know, you have to look at we're sort of bound by their schedule.
Right.
And then we have to find artists whose work, who can be ready at a certain time, you know. So it's a lot of work. I mean, the good thing is that it's a great space, and the audience for shows there is not necessarily, you know, a visual arts audience. They're there to see the play, and maybe at the intermission or before the play they'll come up and see the exhibition, and then they'll find out about us. Mm-hmm. It works out for us because it's only a block and a half from here. Right. So if somebody's over there and they want to talk to us, we can walk right over.
Yeah, that's definitely a good thing about it. Yeah. In terms of the shows, so that's all local artists, and obviously I've seen some of your exhibitions here, and the artists here are, I've seen some local, but not necessarily local. Is that how you have the big shows here and then the smaller over the gallery? Is that your intent?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the shows at this gallery are generally much more well-known artists, as opposed to the Temple, where we like to sort of showcase people in town who are really good, who may not otherwise have a chance to show. I mean, we can't do everything here. We've just got so much space and so many slots, and so that helps fill in those gaps of people we really want to show, but we can't work them into this schedule.
Oh, very nice. I read in the paper just maybe last week that the city's kind of reviewing their relationship with the gallery or the temple. Do you see that's going to be a problem, going from $1 a year rent or a month?
Well, I think it will. It already has, actually. I mean, this year they cut back the hours that the gallery's open, and they cut back a lot of staff. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what this is going to mean, but they've got to come up with another $50,000 or $60,000 a year some way. Now, I think that's totally doable. I think there's a way to do it through fundraising. But yeah, they're going to have to figure out a way to do that. I don't think it's going to impact us in any way, other than maybe they'll cut the hours back even more. I hope not.
Very good. So a couple of recognitions that I read about are for you from the Tucson Pima Arts Council for your work with the gallery, and then for advocating the arts. What do you do in terms of advocating, other than obviously you're showing some of the local artists? And I saw that you did a PSA about public art. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing there?
Well, I mean, I've done a number of things here. I've sat in on a number of committees for public art in town, including the Broadway Underpass, which Steve Farley did years ago. And I mean, I think what we do is provide a very professional atmosphere to view art in. I mean, I always like to tell people that we set the bar high a long time ago, and we try to maintain it. And I feel like we're doing our part because we are in some way, allowing a lot of the artists that we have the only audience, that's possible here. And I was mentioning to you earlier, I'm doing a show next week in Palm Springs, and we're taking only local artists and putting it in front of a huge audience that under no other circumstances would probably ever see this work. So that I feel really proud about, is that we've done our part to support local artists, as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, that's exciting. Looking through, I've taught the history of photography at WCU before, and learning how some of these photographers kind of made their big break. It's exactly that kind of thing. They get in front of just the right person, and it's kind of like overnight success almost. And so that you're providing the service to some local artists.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of photography, another thing that I personally do is I do a lot of photo reviews. There are, starting about 25 years ago in Houston, there was something called Photo Fest where, this whole city would embrace photography for a month, meaning every public space, every commercial gallery space had photography. And a part of that event was to have photographers come and show their work to people like me, gallery owners, curators, publishers, anybody involved in any aspect of the photography world. Well, now there are a bunch of those things. I just participated this summer at Santa Fe, Review Santa Fe, and just about 6 weeks ago I was in New Orleans doing the same thing, looking at 20 to 30 different young photographers' works who had signed up to show me the work. And those kinds of events now have often resulted in photographers getting book deals, getting gallery deals, and their careers taking off. It's kind of exciting. I mean, there's a lot more opportunities than there used to be. The other thing is that, by taking work to an art fair and putting it in front of a big audience, all kinds of things can happen. I mean, we may be able to place the work in a good museum collection or in a very good private collection, and those things tend to sort of feed on themselves. So yeah, I mean, we do that as much as we can.
That's great. Okay, so can you tell me a little bit about, you said running a gallery is very busy. Can you tell me a little bit about what an average day might be like for you?
Well, one of the things I think people have a misconception about is that this is all about the glamour of the art world. I mean, you walk in, you see a show like this, and most people don't understand what it took to get to this point. So, I mean, as an example, this show, we've been planning it for over a year, and getting all the work together and getting it scheduled and getting everything to sort of kind of coexist in the gallery with the other work, that's a lot of work. And I guess the most creative thing that I do, or that I think I'm best at, is making combinations of artists, like finding 3 artists whose work sort of works together and then hanging that together. So in other words, there's sort of a dialogue between all three artists. There's some overlapping concerns, even though the work looks completely different. So, I mean, the very last thing is, the shows. We have an opening, we have a show, and then people come in and see it. But, this is not unlike any other retail business. I mean, I have to sell stuff to keep it going, to keep my staff paid. A typical day now, as opposed to 20 years ago, is I spend 80% of it on my computer. Emailing, working on website things, looking at things that have been submitted. I mean, that's really what my world is like. It didn't used to be that way. I mean, it's just, before, I don't know what we did before computers. I have no idea. I think I was bored a lot because there was nothing to do. Now you just can't keep up with it. And this gallery, in Tucson, is probably a little different than a lot of the other galleries in that our reach is fairly broad. I mean, we have a very good website that is up to date, and we're constantly tweaking it and improving it. We're also with a group called ArtNet, which is a huge umbrella group for thousands of galleries. We've been with them for probably over 20 years. That helps us reach a European audience, especially. And we use Constant Contact and Facebook. So we're out there. If somebody's looking for a gallery in Tucson, they're going to find us immediately. Partially because we're high up on Google searches and we've been here for a long time, and people here just know us. I mean, if you've been here for 32 years, people tend to be able to find you, even though we're on a second floor walk up with no street visibility. This is still a destination.
Yeah, one of the things that I heard about your gallery before moving here. I've been doing the Meet Me at Maynard's run every Monday. Are you familiar with those?
Oh, yeah.
And it's been a great way to learn downtown. And I was so excited that the path goes past your gallery, because then I thought, I know how to get here now.
Yeah, well, this is a historic building. We're on the green trail. I forget. I think it's called the Emerald Trail or something. I think we're number 18 on that, where you can take this map and go around and see different historic buildings. This building was built in 1914. It was the Oddfellows Hall, and the room that we're in was the ballroom. So it's been a lot of things since that. It was the Tucson Fencing Society was up here. There was a theater group up here. All kinds of things prior to us taking it.
It's a lot of fun. You said you have international clients. So for them, I mean, and you also talked about the computers. It's kind of, I think, a blessing and a curse at the same time. So many people are familiar with some of these really classic works just because they've seen it on the computer or seen it in a book. And absolutely, I think that's important, because introducing yourself to this work in any way is a good thing. But when you actually see it in person, it's just such a different experience. Do your clients that are not from Tucson, or especially Europe, do they want to come and see the print beforehand, or do they know what they want, generally speaking, and then they contact you to help get it done?
Well, I mean, there's no substitute for seeing the real thing, because one thing a computer can't do for you is give you scale, as well as just a lot of other subtle things. But in photography in particular, because it's, oftentimes there are multiple prints, the sales that we tend to make to people, like say Europeans who've maybe never been in this gallery, or that we've never even met face to face, they already kind of know what they're looking for, and they've seen that work in another context, and so it's just a matter of finding the exact one that they're interested in. So that's the stuff that we sell that way. Tends to be things that are available as multiples. Rarely do we sell a painting by an unknown artist over the internet. It just doesn't happen. I wish it did, but it doesn't, and and it's understandable, because somebody that's never seen that, especially if it's large, is very unlikely to buy it, sight unseen. Having said that, one of the things that we always do is tell people if we have a return policy, that within 30 days, if for whatever reason it's not what they thought it was, or they're just not satisfied with it, we're happy to return the money. We've done that from day one, actually.
Yeah, it's a good policy, no matter what your business is. Really, you want to have happy clients, and that's the way your business grows. So obviously you display and exhibit work from all different genres of visual art. It seems to me, from the couple exhibits I've seen, that you kind of tend towards photography, and obviously your appraisals is in historic photographs. Is that really your first love in the arts?
Well, it's clearly what I know the most about. I mean, that's my background. You know, I was a photographer. I have a degree in photography, and I know the history of photography pretty well. I mean, my reference library in there, we just had it. Those are all photography books. There's over 4,000 of them. So I have access to a lot of information. Also, you know, the Center for Creative Photography is here in Tucson, which is I was over there this morning actually. Phenomenal resource. I mean, lots of people come in to visit and they end up seeing us. And if I need to go research something, it's right here. So yes, I mean, photography we show more photography here than anything else. And that was the way, it was pretty much like that for the first 4 or 5 years. But after living here for 4 or 5 years, I started meeting artists in other media, and I realized they didn't have a venue for their work that was, you know, serious or consistent. And so we slowly started showing painting and prints and other things. And now, you know, we've got a pretty good stable of artists who are non-photographers. What I like doing too is I really like mixing these things, because a lot of times photography kind of gets ghettoized. You know, it's sort of like photography's over here and everything else is over here. And I really like putting things together. You know, like that. This is a perfect example of a show that, you know, this is drawing and painting on this side of the wall, and that's photography. But I don't think there's any reason in the world it shouldn't be shown together. And so we've done that for a long time. I mean, I mean, part of it is a strategy, because there may be, you know, clients of ours or visitors that want to come see a painting show and don't necessarily want to see a photography show, but they're going to see it anyway because it's up. And sometimes that becomes an epiphany for them. It's like, oh, I never thought of photography this way, or I never would have seen this otherwise. And the same is true for our photography audience, who come in and we want them to start looking at things other than photographs. So we often combine media.
Your current exhibition, Surface Tension, how do you, obviously just you talked with the mixes, how do you come up with these pairings? I mean, you must have, I mean, obviously you have such a great expansive knowledge of art in general, so that you can draw on, but how do you decide, you know, these are the 3 artists that you want to do for any given exhibit? I'm sure it's different from exhibit to exhibit.
It is. I mean, it's a whole process. I mean, what we do starting in about March of every year is we sit down with a calendar and we sit down with a list of artists that we want to show. Now, some of those artists are artists that we show on a regular basis, like Joel Peter Whitkin we show every 2 to 3 years. So he's in the mix this year. The challenge is, who do we show him with? Because certain artists, like Joel's a good example, are pretty hard to pair up because his work is so strong and so unique that it's hard to find something that's got that kind of an edge and is visually is good and the craft is as good. So in this particular case, these are 3 artists that we've shown repeatedly over the years. I mean, we started showing Holly Roberts' work in 1982, and so it's been 30 years with her. And Joel, this is probably the 10th show we've had with him over the last 20 to 25 years, and Alice, we started working with about 10 years ago. But so we sit down with a list of the people we want to show, and some of them, like I said, are built in because we have a regular schedule for them every 2 to 3 years. And that was the case with Joel, and we decided, well, we haven't shown Holly for a while. The work seems to lend itself to showing with Joel, and then Alice had just completed this body of work, so she was ready schedule-wise. It's also very satisfying when, in a case like this, Joel Peter Whitkin, who's internationally known with many, many books, he just had a big retrospective at the Bibliothèque Nationale Paris, is, you know, the most internationally known of these 3 artists. He had never met Alice Briggs, and we were very anxious for him to meet her because we just sensed that there would be a sort of, that they would get along and they would respect each other's work, but you never know. Sometimes egos get in the way and it gets competitive and all that. But in this case, it could not have gone better. I mean, they had a chance to really spend some time together and get to know each other. So I feel like, you know, in a way, I'm kind of a conduit sometimes for that to happen. And I have no doubt that friendship will last and that they'll be in touch with each other and, you know, sort of follow what each other's doing. But, you know, this is a show, too, that I think, in a way, has defined this gallery, or at least separated it from a lot of other galleries in town, in that we will show tough work, and we'll show work with an edge and work that is provocative. I mean, this is a very provocative show, and we know that, and it's not for everybody. But you know, for me, I have to have work like this up that really pushes me a little bit and makes me think and challenges me, or I just get bored to death. I mean, we don't have anything against putting up shows that are really beautiful shows. Like the next show is a painting show, large color landscapes that are just gorgeous, you know. It's sort of the opposite. It's the light side of the dark of this show. But that's kind of what this gallery's been about, is that I like people to come in here and be surprised. You know, it's like, oh, we didn't expect to see this here, you know. And they may not like it. I mean, there's people that come in here now that just won't look at a lot of this work. They don't want to be, you know, they want to have something kind of life-affirming, you know. They don't want to have something that sort of is challenging. Right. But we do that, not just for the sake of provoking people, but because it's important work, and it's work that needs to be seen, and we're the only gallery in town that's really consistently done this.
Very nice. So it's a big question. Do you have any favorite artists? Like any top of the list? Just too many to name, really?
Well, too many to name, but I would say this show right here is a pretty good example of three of my very favorite artists. I mean, I have a great deal of respect for all three of these artists. Joe Peter Whitkin, we've known for a long, long time, great guy. Alice is just amazing, fearless, and Holly, like I said, we worked with her, you know, for 30 years now. But there are too many to say. I mean, where we're sitting right here, this is Michael Berman's one of my favorite artists who lives in New Mexico. He's part of the big show at the Tucson Museum of Art now, the Grassland Show. This woman, Kate Brakey, is a tour de force. I mean, we've shown her 5 or 6 times. She has a big installation at the Tucson Museum of Art. She moved here 13 years ago. She's Australian by birth. Since we're sitting here, these are two of my very favorite artists. And that show, by the way, is not to be missed. It's a great show at the Tucson Museum.
I'll definitely check it out. I guess that's pretty much what I had. Is there anything that you wanted to add that you think I should have asked you?
No, I mean, I think that, you know, for people looking at this program, you know, I would encourage them to go to our website, because on the website there are, you know, the current shows are up, but we also archive shows going back about 10 years. So you can go back and look at the shows with every single object that was in the show, plus installation shots. So it's a lot of stuff to look at, and for somebody who really wants to know what this gallery's about, that's what I tell them to do, to go back and look at not just the current show, but the shows we've done in the past, and you can kind of see, you know, I mean, it documents the artists that we've shown together, and it's a nice little history. I only regret that I didn't start doing that much earlier, you know, from the very beginning. For some reason, I didn't document the early shows, and I really wish I had. Because it's great now to go on the website and go back and say, well, what do we have up 10 years ago? It also works for the artists too, because, you know, they can tell people they can, you know, create a link to our website and the show that they had. Yeah. So that's what I would encourage, you know, especially students that want to really see a lot of work. I mean, that's what I'd suggest.
Yeah, I've appreciated that myself on your website. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you.